So we have already met the main characters of this story. The setting is in 1867, and Charles Smithson and Ernestina Freeman are engaged. And like we said, Charles is a member of the nobility. He is interested in paleontology. Ernestina is the daughter of a draper. She's very rich. And one day they're walking along the shore of Lyme Regis, and they are talking about several things. And Charles sees a woman clad in dark clothes standing in a corner and staring at the sea. And he asks his fiance who this person is. And Ernestina goes into an account of who this woman is. She describes this woman, she talks about who she is. She says that she is the French lieutenant's woman, or she is known as Tragedy. She is referred to as Tragedy. And she has a very bad reputation in that place in Lyme Regis. She's a tutor to a family's children, and she's staying with them. That is Mrs. Poltny. She's staying with them. But she has a bad reputation because, according to Ernestina, she fell in love with a French lieutenant called Vargens. So the name of this lieutenant we only come to know later on. So she fell in love with the lieutenant, and it is rumored that they had physical relationships, and the lieutenant abandoned her. He never ended up marrying her, and now she lives in Lyme Regis and goes out to the sea every day to wait for the French lieutenant's return. So this is a huge scandal because this story is set in the Victorian society, and women were supposed to be chaste back then. Women were not supposed to mingle with men unless they are married to them, and having sexual relationships outside of marriage was simply out of the question. So even the rumor that this Sarah used to have a boyfriend and used to be with him is something so scandalous that she has become a social outcast. Nobody in Lyme Regis likes her. So she's staying with Mrs. Poltny, and she has been staying there for almost a year. Mrs. Poltny is a very strict, very religious woman, and the reason why she keeps Sarah with her is so that she thinks that if she helps Sarah, it will save her soul and she will be able to go to heaven. So after this incident, Charles one day goes out to look for fossils, and he ends up in a place called the Undercliff, and he sees Sarah there sleeping in the grass, and they have a brief interaction. And Sarah often walks in the Undercliff, but Mrs. Poltny does not like it because that place is associated with several bad activities. But Sarah continues to go there. Now she makes sure that nobody sees her. And this is a brief interaction. The next day, Charles, Ernestina's aunt, Mrs. Tranter, all of them go to see Mrs. Poltny and Sarah also. And meanwhile, Charles's manservant, Sam Farrow, is falling in love with Mrs. Tranter's maid, Mary. So their love story is running parallel to the main plot of the novel. Later, again, Charles goes fossil hunting in the Undercliff and again runs into Sarah. And he is sympathetic towards Sarah from the very beginning. Even though there are these very serious rumors around about her, he doesn't seem to believe all of these things, and he is kind towards her. And he says that Mrs. Tranter, Ernestina's aunt, would like to help her. And Sarah says that the French lieutenant will not be coming back. He has married somebody else, and she's all alone. And Charles keeps it from Ernestina and Mrs. Tranter that he has seen Sarah. Charles has a kind of a attraction for her, and there is a reason for this attraction. Sarah is unlike all of the other women in his circles. So all of the other women in his circles are very traditional, are very conformists. They conform to the standards of Victorian society, and Charles is not like that. So he finds Sarah to be a breath of fresh air. And Sarah also, she gets scolded from Mrs. Poltny for walking in the undercliff. And she's in a very depressed state. She doesn't have anyone to call her own. And she briefly considers committing suicide, but she doesn't. And while this is going on, there is a fight between Ernestina and Charles, because Charles is mingling freely with the servants, and Ernestina does not like that, and they have a bit of a fight. But then they make up and they stay together for a few days. And Charles realizes during this time that he feels smothered by her. He does not enjoy being with Ernestina, and this thought that Ernestina is not the right person for him is always at the back of his mind. So again, one day, Charles goes to the Undercliff. He goes there to keep collecting fossils, and again he meets Sarah there, and Sarah just does something out of the ordinary. Until then, she wants to be left alone. In all of their previous meetings, she's somewhat diffident to talk to him, but today she goes up to him and says that she wants to tell him her life story of what happened with the French lieutenant. And she says that she wants to talk to somebody and just unburden herself, someone sympathetic. And Charles looks like someone sympathetic. And Charles is kind of uncomfortable with it, even though he's attracted. He knows that it'll be very bad if someone sees them together, and they should not be meeting. But anyway, Sarah tells him the story of her and the French lieutenant, and his name is Wagner. She gave herself to him. That is, she had physical relationships with him, despite knowing that he would not marry her. And there is a clear sexual tension between Charles and Sarah. He asks her to go away, and he would help. They agree that they should not meet again like this. And that evening, Charles, Ernestina, and Mrs. Tranter have dinner with Dr. Grogan, and they after this, Charles and the doctor have a drink and begin to discuss Sarah. And Grogan says that she has a bad case of melancholia. Melancholia is a Victorian term for what we call depression, and Grogan says that she must tell somebody her story, and only after that she will feel better. And during this conversation, they discover that they both have some common things, common traits, and they both have common interests. For example, Charles Darwin. And Charles meets Sarah again, and in that meeting, she tells him everything about her French lieutenant Vargas. So she says that she did it because she feels that circumstances of her life will never allow her to be happy. So she is neither a rich person, neither a poor person. She's somewhere in the middle. She's an outcast everywhere, and she wants to be an outcast so that people will understand how much she is suffering. And later they come upon Sam and Mary. They are kissing, so they know that these two people are in love. And Sarah walks back to Lyme, and she makes sure that Mrs. Fairley sees her, so that there will be some issue and Sarah will be kicked out of the house later on. And Charles's uncle, out of the blue, summons him to the estate. And Charles is very happy to go to the estate to meet his uncle, because he believes that eventually his uncle's considerable fortune would be his. But the uncle drops a bad news on him, saying that he has found a woman to marry, and once they marry, if they have heirs, once they have married, anyway, he will have a wife now, so his estate will go to her after his time. And this is a blow to Charles, because now Charles does not have any money. So Charles is crestfallen, and he comes back to Lyme with the bad news. And Ernestina is angry because both of them wanted Charles to inherit this. Charles needed to inherit the money from his uncle because he does not have any independent wealth. His own father's fortune has declined, so his eye was on his uncle's inheritance. And Ernestina, on the other hand, she is not a member of the nobility. Her dream was to marry a person who belongs to the noble class. And if Charles's uncle does not pass on his title, then Charles will not get that title. Charles will not be a titled member of the nobility, and Ernestina is disappointed. And Charles, also during this time, Mrs. Poltny has fired Sarah for walking in the undercliff, and Sarah is nowhere to be found. She has left a note for him, asking him to meet her again, and she has left the note with Sam, and Sam is, for his part, he's starting to realize that things will not go very smoothly because Charles is no longer going to get the inheritance. So now he is planning to blackmail Charles so that he can have his dream of starting a shop. And later there's a meeting between Charles and Dr. Grogan, and they discuss Sarah and they discuss the note, and they both worry that she might try to commit suicide. And Grogan thinks that she should be taken to an asylum, and that she got fired on purpose because she wants to hurt herself and to manipulate people. And his assessment, this is his assessment, but Charles does not agree with Dr. Grogan. Like I said before, he is much more sympathetic towards Sarah. And Grogan gives Charles an account of an event where a man was convicted for an attempted rape, but it turned out that the girl was actually, making it up. It was a false accusation, and he tries to scare Charles, saying that there are such women. Women are not always innocent. There are such women who will manipulate people. And Charles is kind of scared, but he still maintains the view that Grogan's opinion of Sarah is wrong. Again, Charles and Sarah meet, and she says that she got fired on purpose. They kiss. And but Charles runs out of the barn, and they find that Sam and Mary are outside, and they now Sam and Mary know that there's something going on between Charles and Sarah, and Charles makes them promise not to say anything. And he asks Sarah to leave Lyme and go to this place called Exeter.